Previously on Henshin Power V3. Just go listen to the last episode. Seriously. I don't need to do a recap here. But hello! Once again, I am Nathan Marchand, aka the TsuBro, here to continue my coverage of Dark Horse's Ultraman Tiga comic from the early 2000s. Like I said, if you want to get all of the preliminary information and all that on this very strange, kind of forgotten entry in the chapter, I should say, in the Ultraman franchise, go listen to last week's bonus episode. All right, so let's move into Volume 2 of this comic, the graphic novel called Past Sins, Future Dangers. We'll be talking about issue number 5, which is listed as a new chapter, but I think it means chapter is in chapter of this graphic novel. Again, I still think it's a little bit strange that it's 4 and 6 is the dividing line. So, our cover this time around. Oh, by the way, the title of this episode is Attack of the Regulon Seijin. Well, that's setting us up for a little bit of disappointment, isn't it? Although I do appreciate the little bits of that little bit of Japanese is still in there, Seijin, which means star people or alien. And our cover here, which has 2 members of the Guts team. I'm not entirely sure who, because one has his back to us and one has a visor over his or her face. I think it might be a woman. I'm not sure. They are surrounded by what look like people who are slowly turning into Baltans. But spoiler warning, it's not Baltans. Our cover art here is by Alan Tam and Omar Dogan. I hope I read that right, of Udon Entertainment. All right. Something that I should mention about, the format for these comics when they were published is a little bit different, because at least from one of the websites I looked at, I'm trying to see if that was brought up in any of this research, but there was a slightly different format that it was used for the later issues of this, and I'm not sure what it's called, but the early issues were standard size American comic books. I'm not seeing what it's called here, but I know on one of the websites it mentioned a different one, a very Japanese sounding format. But anyway, we'll get into this. So, flipping through this, we open up on some ships being attacked, and by something, we don't know what. And then the team gets alerted to this. They go to investigate, and in one of the more gruesome scenes that I don't think Tsuburaya would have been willing to do this on TV, we have a trickle of blood, what appears to be blood because the way it's colored, it's a muted red. So you couldn't say it's a different fluid, but it's very apparent. It's very apparent that it's supposed to be blood. Falls on one team member's hand. They look up, and suddenly all of the sailors that we saw before are crawling Spider-Man style on the ceiling, but they have rabid red zombie eyes, and they come after the team, and then they retreat into their ship. Oh, not their ship, but they come after them, and then we cut to poor Reina, who gets ambushed by, again, those Baltan-looking aliens in a car. She jumps out of the car crashes, and then she vomits blood, or I'm assuming it's blood, and boy howdy, does she vomit a lot of it. A lot of it. Like I said, it's a little more gruesome than the show was willing to go. And then out of the burning wreckage of this car, which is in a tunnel, I might add, these Baltan-looking things pop out. And then, for no reason other than it's a trope of manga and anime, we get a flashback to Reina's backstory, explaining to us how she was at the top of her class in school. We see her in a schoolgirl uniform because that's a thing. And with this pixie haircut and the school uniform, she's really starting to remind me of Sakura from Street Fighter, but that's the kind of guy I am. And then it shows her in a crop top doing what look like astronaut tests and doing track running and proving that, she's incredibly capable, not only mentally, but physically. And that's how she got to be in Guts. And then we cut back to, again, these very Baltan looking aliens coming up to her, and she tries, no. And this is one of the weird things about this comic, is that you do a page turn and it's still in one scene, and then that's just the first panel, and then this has happened twice now in this issue, and then the rest of the panels in that page is another scene. So we go back to the team on the ship being attacked by these Baltan zombie, half Baltan zombie looking things. So we have this big action sequence. We got all of these, again, like I said, like we're talking about, like, we have humans running around with what look like crab claws. Again, you would think these are Baltans attacking our team and trying to hold them off. It gets kind of Night of the Living Dead-ish. And then we start seeing, not only do they have, some have crab claws, but they have the helmet looking crests and their eyes are glowing. And then we find out that one of them, spoiler warning, plot twist, Shyamalan twist, one of them's Reina. So she has come under the thrall of these aliens. And I will admit, the artwork for this is very impressive, very eerie at points. There's even a point later on where we see one of, I don't think it's one of the Guts team members, but it's another soldier. And we see in rather gruesome detail, his hand turns into one of the alien claws. And it looks like, his hands are swelling and crunching up. And we see blood splurting out at points. And it's just, again, way more gruesome than the show would ever be. Somebody gets his helmet knocked off. There's all of this chaos going on right now. And then we get to a different part of the ship and they're trying to figure out what's going on. As you would expect, it's Daigo and what is it? Daigo and Shinjo? Yeah, it's Daigo and Shinjo. And then Shinjo gets his helmet knocked off. And after a scuffle in the water, and then we cut back to Guts HQ, or maybe this is in Guts HQ, if I remember. Well, I'm trying to remember. Like I said, I'm just kind of breezing through this. We do cut to Guts HQ, and Reina, again, under the control of these aliens, bursts in and takes over the place. And then we cut to, what is this? Oh, we go to a shrine, which is something they were going to go investigate. Because there was some trouble going on over there. It's a full tilt Shinto shrine with a torii gate, a temple, a bell, big bell. And then we find out that these are not, in fact, the Baltans. They are the Regulans. The Regulans, from what I've been able to piece together, because I thought, come on, they have to be the Baltans. A classic Ultraman foe like this, it has to be them. They are and aren't original to this comic, from what I have been able to piece together on the Ultra Wiki. There was an alien species in the show. They were called the Raguran, which might just be an L&R issue. I don't remember how it was subtitled when I watched the show, but you could still call them Regulan. The thing is that for the sake of discussion, we'll call them Regulans. The Regulans on the show did not look like this. They look not completely different, but different enough. So they're from the Nemesis Nebula in the show. Their subtitle is Wicked Alien. And let's see, they were in episode 7. The Man Who Came Down to Earth. Have they been in anything else? They were also in Dyna. I forgot about that. And at that time, we had a named Regulan in that one. General Zoaka. Yeah. But they have pointy heads. They don't have crab claws. They have it looks like little claws, but they aren't massive crab claws. But yeah, they have a semblance of the Baltans, but not enough that you could just completely change the design. They're really only, you can either call them Regulans in name only, or you could call them Baltans in all but name. It is really bizarre, and I don't understand. I don't know if this was something that the comic did originally, or if this was a decision on the part of Dark Horse, but I really don't get it. So yeah, it's just a really bizarre choice on the part of this comic. Dark Horse, it would have behooved them to just name them the Baltans. They even behave a bit more like Baltans, and the power set's closer to Baltans. It's just, I don't get it. We're introduced to them. They monologue a little bit about what they're planning on doing and their backstory and blah, blah, blah. And then on cue, Tiga shows up and starts wrecking house, picks a fight with a couple of them. Guts is trying to get there. Also, I can't remember if it's here or later. I think it's later, because they're trying to figure out why only some of the team members fell victim to the Regulans' influence and others didn't. And they're also trying to find a cure for it, because that's what you do in these sorts of stories. I'm trying to remember if they revealed it here or not, what was actually going on. Yes. It's because there was a sound wave, and some of them were wearing the right type of helmet that actually blocked out the signal, and some of them were not. That's why the grunt-looking guys got transformed, but the regular Guts members with the regular helmets were not, because one of the Guts members lost his helmet when he fell into the water. It was Shinjo. When Shinjo fell into the water, lost his helmet, and then he became one of the thralls of the Regulans. So, in what I have to admit is a really impressive set piece that, again, would have been probably a bit difficult to do on a TV budget in the 90s, we have Tiga and two of the Regulans who grow to giant size, as you do in Ultraman, and they fight on top of their gigantic spaceship. And it's got all of the anime action goodness that you would want with that. The effect of the influence, I should say, of the Regulans is broken. Reina remembers who she is, and she starts having a little bit of an existential crisis about how she's endangered a bunch of people, and she feels responsible for what's happening. We cut back to the big fight scene, and they fight, as SF Debris would say. And it ends with Tiga breaking their spaceship, blowing it the heck up. Everything falls to the ground, including our hero and villains. And then we have this one last massive panel that has a slightly different art style than the rest of the comic. Again, it's more detailed. It looks painted. It's as opposed to the very nice pencil drawings that we've been seeing. And again, we're also getting thought bubbles from Daigo as Tiga while this is all going on. But we have this beautiful shot of fiery debris falling down as Tiga confronts the two Regulans, and that is our cliffhanger. So, as an issue, it's a solid issue, but again, it's getting weird with the fact that they're taking the name of a Tiga monster, but they're using the design of a classic Ultraman monster that's far more recognizable. It's just a bizarre choice. It's not the weirdest thing that we're gonna see in this comic, but it's still weird. So let's move on to the proper halfway point. Well, I guess we've gotten past the halfway point now. But issue 6, which is called Attack of the Regulan Seijin, Part 2. For those who don't know what I'm saying, that means 2. Part 2. And we have a pretty nice, though kind of standard sort of cover here that also looks very 90s comic book. That's Tiga, a very buff Tiga, fighting the two Regulans. He's got one on either side of him, while there are trees that only go up to about his ankles, and the rest of the team, the Guts team, in the foreground. And this cover was created by Eric Vetter and Omar Dogan of Udon Entertainment. And then we pick up right where we left off, and Tiga's going at it with the Regulans, trading blows. They try to battle banter with him a little bit, but he can only have thought bubbles. He can't actually talk for now. Foreshadowing. So we got all kinds of anime action. We've got energy blasts being thrown at each other. Stuff is blowing up. And all that kind of stuff. We've got Tiga spinning around like a tornado and then elbowing a Regulan in the face. That actually probably could have been done on the show pretty easily, but maybe not easily, but could have been done on the show. But hey, this is a comic book. We don't have to worry about things like suits and special effects and suit actors and all that. So they go back and forth. We've got Tiga grabbing one of their claws as he's trying to hammer him with it and making it hit a mountain, and that blows things up. And unfortunately, our hero gets knocked over, and they start beating on him while he's down. The Guts team is freaking out. And then Guts decides to get involved with this whole thing, which gives him just enough time, as Reina is still having her existential crisis and crying her eyes out, thinking that this is all her fault. It gives Tiga just enough time to whip out his Specium Beam. You know what? I'm going to make sure I know what it's actually called. Let's see what that is actually called on here. I know it's not a Specium Beam. It's called something else. But I'm going to look it up live here because I'm such a terrible fan. I don't know what it's called offhand. Ultraman Tiga. On the Ultraman Wiki, let's go down to his exhaustive list of techniques, because every Ultra has one of those. Here you go. It's called the Zephyrian Beam. So there you go. A Zephyrian Beam. I'll have to remember that going forward. So he's able to do that. And then in one of the weirder moments of action in this comic, we have one panel at the bottom of a page in a corner where it looks like Tiga. Well, first off, Tiga looks like he's jumping up at a Regulan. Looks like he's going to headbutt him. Looks like he is headbutting him. But then he has a hand up like he's going to shoot him with an energy attack. But then suddenly in the next panel, we just see his two hands rushing at the Regulan's face. But then we cut to the panel on the next page, and he's slamming the Regulan onto the ground with just one hand. I don't understand what happened there. He sends this Regulan flying, who hits the cliffside where the temple is, knocks the temple off. Poor Reina is still there, but Tiga is such a cool guy. He grabs it as it's falling. It's a really cool looking moment because the temple is flipped upside down, and he grabs the bottom of it, pulls it back up, and then the two aliens try to get him from behind, but Tiga is too cool. Well, no, I should say he is. It's not that he is. It's not that he is too cool for that. He just starts getting hit in the back by the aliens, and Rain is like, "Oh my gosh, you're doing this for me! Please don't make yourself suffer." Blah blah blah, and he ends up falling down the cliffside. Well, this from the alien attacks, Reina falls out of the temple, and he catches her in his hand. It's really cool. And then the aliens try to come after him again. They jump down there. We got water going on now. Now his color timer's going off. And Reina's like, "I know what the flashing means. Oh no, you're going to die." That's something that they established in the previous volume. Apparently, if the color timer the biotic sensor starts beeping and then it stops, Tiga will die. Again, something they set up, but they don't really utilize later other than to remind you, oh no, this means he's going to die. And then just when all is lost, Guts shows up in one of their larger aircraft and starts shooting the Regulans. Something fierce. Well, no, they don't shoot the Regulans. I take that back. They shoot the dam to flood the area, which gives Tiga some time after he deposits Reina in a safe spot to switch to power type and start myrtleizing the Regulans. He manages to kill one of them, and then the other one retreats. We get another one of those nice painted panels here. It's a nice profile, not quite a profile shot, but it's a nice little standing shot of Power Type Tiga. I will admit, it looks pretty cool. So that Regulin gets away. We have a nice little denouement. Tiga flies away. And then we cut halfway through one of the last pages of this issue. We cut to a distant planet. It says, meanwhile, on a small cold planet in the farthest outreaches of the Scorpio galaxy. And we see that surviving Regulin talking to some strange-looking being who appears to be on fire. And then he gets up and he looks massive. Absolutely massive. Looks also from this, because this is a full-page panel that we're talking, it's a splash page that we're looking at here. And this thing looks like a gigantic cobra from this angle, but if you pay close attention, you can tell it's not a cobra. He just has, they're not, I don't know what you would call them. They're, I guess, ears, but they're not really ears, but they're where ears should be, and they look huge. And he starts going on about, it's like, I have none to give, regular surgeon, because he asked for forgiveness. And he says, in my exile here, I have grown more powerful than even your own foolish king could comprehend. I should kill you now and march on your home world. I should take back what's rightfully mine. Blah, 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 blah. All kinds of supervillainy stuff. He says, but you have shown me a sweeter prize. Instead of taking your diseased, dying planet, I'll claim the Earth as my own. And then he starts transforming. This scene that I just read for you is the smartest that this character is going to come across for the rest of this comic. And this is also where we take a hard left turn into 90s Todd McFarlane land. Because the last panel on the last page of this issue, we have this character who, in case you were wondering, is named Makila. And I'll get to how he's sort of in the show, but not really in a moment here. He makes himself a human form. It's a kind of short, fat human with a mohawk and a leather jacket that has skulls on it. And as soon as I saw this, I thought to myself, he looks like Clown, or Violator, if you prefer. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, there is no way. I mean, yes, there are some major design differences between Clown and Makila, but the influence of Todd McFarlane and that character on and Clown, I should say specifically, Violator, whatever, is readily apparent with this. Because this guy has a fat, kind of buffoonish, sort of edgy human form and a monster form. And as what you'll see as I continue through this comic, he's a mother trucking psycho. Now, is he quite the same level of maniacal as Clown / Violator? Arguably not, but he gets it. He does some truly insane things for the remainder of this comic. And you're left to believe with how powerful he is being presented here, and with what a big deal he's being presented here, that he's going to be the villain for at least the next issue. Spoiler warning, he's going to be here for the rest of the comic, but he will not end up being the big bad for the final issue. And boy howdy, when we get to that final issue, I have opinions. Some very, very strong opinions. So, let's move on to our next issue. So that was 6, so this should be 7. Yeah. 5, 6, 7. Yep. It's called Things Fall Apart, not to be confused with a novel by the same name. Can't remember the author's name, but I read it when I was in grad school, and I found out it's become standard reading for high schoolers. Now, I will be getting into a little bit more about Makila. You know what? I'm going to mention it here. The Ultra Wiki theorizes that Makila is based on Machina, but they look completely, which is a monster from the show, but they look completely different. He's from episode 9 of the show. He's based on an armadillo. This thing does not look like an armadillo at all. His name in that comes from Deus Ex Machina, obviously. If I remember correctly, I believe he is a robot. And the name of the episode he's from, like I said, is The Girl Who Waits for a Monster. Well, now that I think about it, looking at this design a little more closely, I can see some resemblance here. But in terms of personality and such, this is completely different. This story is completely different as well. He was supposed to be a monster who was buried there a couple hundred years beforehand. And there's a girl looking for him. It's a much more endearing story, and he's a much more sympathetic monster. This guy is evil incarnate in many, many ways, as you'll soon see. And the design is slightly different from what you see in the comic. Like, this thing just starts taking some very bizarre liberties. And it's only going to get weirder as time goes on. But anyway, we have issue 7. Our cover has a nice group shot of the Guts team with Daigo in the center, and then 3 on either side of him. And they're casting a shadow behind them that combine, well, but each of the members has their own shadow, but then you see Daigo's shadow is naturally Ultraman Tiga, although the design for Daigo on this cover is a little different than what we see in the comic. For one thing, his hair is shorter. Our cover art here is by Alvin Lee and Robert Campus, what a name, of Udon Entertainment. So, we open at, it says Japanese Parliament, so it should be the Diet, but it's not the Diet. And they're having a meeting about how there were 48 people who were killed in Shizuoka, and were shown burning corpses in the background, including flaming skeletal remains and burnt bodies again, and even a point where, it's just close-ups of all this. The show would never try to do something like this, not at all. And we're introduced to, I'm trying to find his name, General Tojo. That name had to have been chosen purposefully. If you know Japanese history, this is almost on par with naming somebody, I don't know, Adolf. Look up General Tojo. He was the military commander in Japan during World War II, was a staunch imperialist, and was the guy who convinced the emperor to stay in the war far longer than Japan should have. So yeah, I think this is a very clear indication, especially if you're a Japanese reader, this guy is a bad guy. And if you're American, you just think he's a bad guy because he's as bald as Lex Luthor. So anyway, he starts going on and on about how all these deaths are happening and Guts is not doing their job, blah, 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 and all that fun stuff. And then, long story short, he gets Guts disbanded to the shock of everyone. Then we cut to a city street. We have some people who are dancing. I guess they're having a block party while listening to a boombox. Remember those? It's about as 90s as you can get, because we have a boombox, we have a block party, we have skateboarding. And then Makila comes by in his human form, looking as nasty as possible. We get a subtle confirmation that he is the one who is responsible for those gruesome deaths that we saw at the beginning, because he says, compared to that ball of fire I came from, it ain't half bad. Lots of nice scenery, he says as he walks by a pair of cute girls. Yuck. But that's only the start of this madness. he walks through a skate park and people are just falling all over themselves. You got women crying. We got a baby crying or running to its mother. Like, just all he has to do is walk into a room and people are losing their minds. And then he's like, huh? Why did it get so quiet all of a sudden? Are they on to me? If any one of these humans knows, I'll have to kill them all. Nah, there's no way they could see my true form. I'll just act casual and keep walking. And then there's a guy with long hair and sunglasses, and he says, check it out. Dude's 4 feet tall and must be like 500 pounds. And another guy who's hardly a looker himself, he says, and what's up with that hair? And then Makila is just like, what, they don't like me? And he walks by a magazine stand, and oh boy. This was one of the moments in this comic. This is going on definitely the top 3 list for weirdest moments in this comic. So Makila, feeling kind of dejected from all of this, weirdly enough. Again, that scene that he had before, that's the smartest, the most intimidating he's probably going to be for this entire run. So he walks by this magazine stand and he sees a magazine on the rack, and it just says in giant letters, I probably should have translated the kanji just to see what it said, but in English lettering in large friendly letters, if you know, you know, it says sexy, although some of it's blocked out. And there's a blonde woman with a bow in her hair wearing a one-piece swimsuit, sitting provocatively, I guess you could say, big smile on her face, and it says sexy down the side of her swimsuit. Okay, showing a lot of hip with this, given the angle. And Makila draws from this that, oh, humans like looks. That's how you win them over. So he wants to give them something nice to look at. And we see the final panel on this page. He's throwing his head back, and he's got his eyes are blanked out as this kind of greenish yellow, and we got energy flying out of his eyes. And then we cut to then you have this page start, and there's all this energy swirling around like a tornado. It's all green and yellow, and you see stuff forming around him, and it looks like pieces of debris of like flying around. It's all very dramatic. And then he turns himself into an ugly fat chick. It's just him with longer hair, a bow, and and the exact same swimsuit, and it's got this pink background with flowers all around it. He says, if physical beauty is all it takes to conquer you people, you may as well give up now. And then he starts puckering his lips. We see little hearts coming coming from him as he does. And he says, who's first? Who wants to be close to the most glamorous woman in the world? And everyone freaks out and runs away, naturally. And that just leaves him angry and confused. And what is he? I think he grabs the bow out of his hair and starts chewing on it. It is truly one of the weirdest things in this entire comic. It feels weirdly 90s. This humor is so strangely juvenile because that was the thing about so many 90s comics, is they tried so hard to be edgy, thinking that that's what made you grown up, that they ended up becoming even more juvenile. It just screamed try hard. I'm not saying every 90s comic was like that, but a lot of them were. And it was just mind-boggling. This was one of the scenes when I read it, I'm like, this belongs in something different. This should not be in an Ultraman story. This does not feel like Ultraman. I would be more willing to accept this in a Toei property. Super Sentai, maybe Kamen Rider. But for certainly Super Sentai, this feels like Super Sentai shenanigans here. And it's just, like I said, it just left me baffled. Absolutely baffled. But anyway, we cut to an actually attractive woman, Reina, who's basically been demoted to janitor duty at an Air Force base. And, everybody's just trying to get along now that Guts has been disbanded. We get a quick rundown of what everybody is doing. And then we meet Captain Munakata, who's, just saying like, hey, we have to obey orders. He's the obey orders at all costs trope soldier character. And Reina's like, no, we don't. Something's wrong here. You can't just blindly follow orders, blah, blah, blah. So we've got that character drama going on. And we cut to Mr. Tojo, General Tojo, who's, cracking jokes about how, they'll eventually get in line because his goal is to break them. And, he's drinking his alcohol, letting it drip down his chin, just so you know how evil he really is. Where'd that come from? And then we cut to Makila standing at the fence to the base, and he's entranced by the nuclear missiles. Because apparently this is an alternate universe in which, because as far as I know, this is still in Japan, Japan now has nukes on their land. Apparently, the 3 non-nuclear principles have been done away with. Now that we are, by this comic standards, about 50 years in the future. Because there's nothing here that tells me this is anywhere but Japan. Clearly, our friends Tony Wong, I guess it would be both of them, but our friends Tony Wong and Ku Fuk Lung didn't get the memo about how Japan doesn't want to have nukes anywhere near them. Oops. Or maybe it is really just the natural conclusion of things, with what Japan is doing now. They're trying to revise their constitution so they can have a standing army and all of that. But I find it highly unlikely that they will ever get to the point culturally where they will be willing to have their own nuclear arsenal. I just don't see that happening. So that is a major critique that I have to make of this comic, because you could interpret it as culturally, at least culturally insensitive. It's probably more likely culturally ignorant. I'm not saying that this plot point shouldn't exist, but if they were going to do this, it probably should have been set somewhere else, not Japan. Or at the very least compromise and say that this is an American base with nukes on it, and they had to cut a deal to do that. The thing is, Hong Kong, I think this would have been right after 1988. That would have been right after Hong Kong was given back to the Chinese after being a British colony, because that was 1997, if I remember correctly. So you got that influence. Britain is a nuclear power, and so is China. So I'm not going to assume the worst on the writer's part here, because I really don't know. I don't think any ill will was meant by this. It's just, we need these nukes to get the attention of our bad guy. So, because Makila is an alien with superpowers, he overhears all this and thinks that General Tojo, as he puts it, sounds like my kind of guy. So then basically, Tojo's like, I have a world to run, and then decides to take a little drive, and he gets met by Makila in the parking garage. He tries to make him an offer he can't refuse. He refuses it anyway, says screw you, gets in his car, drives away, and apparently, judging by the exhaust on this thing, he's got some nitro in this car. Your tax dollars at work, Japan, I suppose. And Makila just sits on the hood. Like, I don't know what he thinks. I guess he just thinks he's going to be so heavy it won't move. And he gets right up to the windshield to talk to him, and then just smashes through the windshield to grab at Tojo. And we have this rather horrific scene where, he's kind of going pseudo monster here. It's smashing through the windshield to get at Tojo. The car wrecks, and Makila gets smashed between the bumper of the car and a wall. And there's this a light red, almost orangish looking. No, he's getting run over, I should say. And it's gruesome because we got at this point where it looks like he's getting run over, and we have this orangish red, but light colored. It's clearly blood is coming out of him as he's getting run over. He's like, "Gah!" Again, the show would never do this. And then he goes flipping, flopping all over the place. Tojo's yelling at him. But because, again, he's an alien with superpowers, Makila gets out from behind the car, goes into his Violator, alien form, wrecks this car. And there's even this really weird panel at the top of one page after you turn the page where we see Makila's human form sticking out of the nose of his monster form just to taunt Tojo because now his car's been flipped over. And then we cut to the Akita Air Force Base, and we see missiles being aimed, and we find out that General Tojo ordered all of these things. The implication being he's been forced by Makila to aim these nukes at particular targets, and then our Guts members come storming in and say, "No, you can't do that." And then Tojo basically says to arrest them for insubordination. And, even their friend, Captain Munakata, comes in, and he's the one who's actually arresting them. So, blah, blah, blah. I'm the one in charge. We follow orders. Do what I say. Not knowing, that we have an alien masterminding this whole thing. And speaking of him, there's this massive kind of glass dome. Not really dome, but this massive glass window that circles this command center. And Makila is standing on one of those windows and smashes his way through. And then here's where we get some more 90s Todd McFarlane-isms, where these kind of claws start popping out. They pop out of Makila's back while he's still in his human form, and it smashes the window. And then one of them reaches down as he flies through, grabs Tojo by the arm, restrains him. They're kind of becoming a little bit crab-like at this point, but not quite. And then the missiles launch. And Makila is sadistically, I don't know what's the right word, gleeful, sadistically gleeful, that's how we'll put it, about this. And our team's, they're in prison, they see the missiles launched, trying to figure out what to do. Munakata's like, "No, what just happened?" And then the missiles start hitting things. They're not nukes, but they cause some very severe damage. And it's very clear that we have civilians down there because we see some of them as the missiles are hitting the ground and haven't detonated yet. And we see people flying off of motorcycles and things like that because it lands on a busy street. People trying to get out of their cars and run. And then we cut to this massive splash page. It's a 2-page spread. And it takes up most of those 2 pages, and we just see buildings exploding. And we cut down to this very stylized, again, 2-page spread where it's a bit of a split screen of Daigo, a close-up of Daigo's eyes with flames all around him, and it's red and orange, and he's freaking out about how there are people dying. And what am I, and it says, "What do I do?" And our issue ends. So we go for an entire issue with no Tiga. This entire issue was the Makila show. This is one of the weirdest things in all of Ultraman that I have ever seen. I will admit I have not absorbed or been exposed to the entire franchise, but I've seen a massive chunk of it. This is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. And I would have been able to accept this if it had been an American-made comic, and if this had been set in America and all that, but this was made in China, and it's just so bizarre. There's just so many things that don't make sense in this comic. This is kind of a turning point in this comic, because going forward, it is going to feel a heck of a lot less like an Ultraman story. And it's just going to start feeling very, very 90s comic book. And not in a good way. Warning you right now. All right, let's get into our next issue. So now we have Fire from the Skies. So this would be, so that says chapter 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yes, this is issue 8. And our cover, it's a pretty evocative cover, I'll say that. It has Tiga standing on top of what I'm assuming is a nuke, doing a little bit of a Spider-Man pose, looking like he's about ready to punch this thing. And, it's a nice perspective of it because it looks like the missile's kind of flying right at the camera, but not quite. And the hand that's closest to the quote-unquote camera, it looks like it's really, the fingertips look like they're really gripping into this missile. Again, very Spider-Man-like. And our cover artist is Andrew Howe. That's why I wanted to say Howard, of Udon Entertainment. All right, so after a quick little recap for a couple of panels, we see Makila now kind of standing on these weird, spidery, almost crab-like arms and just gloating over everything. And he's got Tojo restrained with another one of them, just going on and on about how, cool all of this is and how he's just going to kill everybody for the heck of it, blah, blah, blah. And then the Air Force responds and he launches missiles against the Air Force, takes all of them out. He even says like, oh, those pilots aren't half bad. But then he ends up just destroying everything and killing everybody. And we find out, and again, in another very 90s turn of events, he extends out his crabby arm thing and just starts taking out airplanes himself, and they start wrapping around. They almost look like symbiotes as drawn by Todd McFarlane, where they start flying up and they start grabbing airplanes and smashing them, slicing them in half. He's just gleefully murdering people at this point. And then we cut to we see another missile about ready to get launched. This is the actual nuke. The other ones were just big, mean missiles. This is now we're getting to the actual nuke. And he wants Tiga to come. That's been one of his goals. He's trying to get Tiga's attention. It's another reason why he's doing this. He wants Tiga's attention. He wants to pick a fight with Tiga. So then we cut to a holding cell where we have Reina and Munakata, and he admits that he was wrong and he shouldn't have been doing this. And, he tries to be helpful, but he's also kind of stupid, and he tries to break down the door. He throws his shoulder at it and just ends up injuring himself. We even get this weirdo panel where it's an X-ray of his shoulder, and we see his shoulder bones popping. It's just really strange. You would think that this would... I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. I'm trying to remember if he got a moment of redemption. I think he did, but it's just weird that he's doing this. It feels kind of needless for somebody who's supposed to be a disciplined soldier. He was being kind of stupid here. And then the soldiers come in, take them out, and they're starting to have second thoughts about everything. Daigo uses this moment to transform into Tiga when nobody's looking and jumps out there. We see another airplane being attacked by the spindly arms of Makila. And then Tiga starts to intervene. And then we get this absolutely insane but really cool 2-page spread that, again, looks like a different art style because this page looks like it was painted. And the colors are vibrant and it just looks really cool. We got a blue background and it's Tiga grabbing 2 different jet fighters and trying to keep them from wrecking. I'm guessing either these jets are gigantic or Tiga is human size. Otherwise, the proportions on this don't make any sense. And that is something Tiga can do. Yeah, looking at this previous panel, he's human size because he's looking at one of the pilots through the canopy. And this is something that Tiga can do. Shout out to Chris. I always love talking to him whenever I come across an Ultra that can be human sized. It's a little bit of a thing that we have. All right, and then Tiga starts summoning some energy, and then does this burst, and it looks very similar to what we saw in issue 1 in the Ancient Civilization flashback, where he just does this burst of energy and destroys a bunch of nearby missiles. And then basically dive kicks, almost rider kicks, straight down to the command tower or whatever, where Makila is, bursts in there, and comes crashing down and gets ready to pick a fight with him. He's taking out some more stuff on the airstrip. So then Makila goes full tilt kaiju, bursts out of the command tower and gives him a challenge. And then Tiga decides to abide by his challenge, picks a fight with him. Neither one of them seem to be quite, well, no, by this point they get full size. So they're both fighting at their full size. So they're both giants at this point. And we get some delicious kaiju fight in action here at this airport, and then it moves over into the city, and we've got Tiga trying to avoid collateral damage. Well, Makila is definitely not. And then in a shot that we've seen stuff like this happen before in Ultraman, it looks like poor Tiga gets stabbed by the crab arms. And then in a really weird move here that might just be because it would be how these are, the next couple pages are just choreographed weirdly. He grabs the two ends of these crab arms and then somehow uses that to suplex Makila. I don't know how he gets the leverage to do that. Then he goes flying up and then comes flying back down and plunges both of his fists flying straight down. I've seen Superman do maneuvers like this, right into what I'm assuming is Makila's belly, which makes some blood splatter because there's one whole panel dedicated to that. And Makila starts freaking out that he's like, no, this can't happen. So I guess he's realizing that Tiga's a little bit tougher than he thought. We cut to the Guts team that they're running around trying to get people out of this base. And then we find Tojo under some debris. And then Makila, as all good supervillains do, is particularly if you're fighting somebody who, say, is as powerful as Superman, he's like, oh, you like the humans? I'm going to go after the humans instead of you. So he starts going after the Guts team. And Reina gets shoved out of the way by Munakata. So this is one of those little moments of redemption for him. And then as he does that and Makila's claw comes down to grab at people, he ends up grabbing conveniently Tojo and Munakata. Takes them away. You would think he would just crush them, even if by accident, but somehow he doesn't. So he holds them up and he says, hey, Tiga, I got these two humans. They're my hostages. Do what I tell you. And it's at this point that Makila just starts being, he's already been kind of stupid. Well, not stupid, but obnoxious. And then he just starts being really stupid and even kind of petty. This is not exactly how you want to present your supervillain. I'm all for psychotic supervillains. I can work with that. Madmen are great villains, particularly when they're just completely unhinged. I think the best kind of madman is one who's mostly under control until he snaps. But that's not the kind of guy this is. I think the creators intended for Makila to be something like a Joker, but even the Joker doesn't do something this kind of, typically anyway, doesn't do anything that's quite as stupid and petty as this. So he just starts making up rules and forcing Tiga to abide by them. It's really bizarre. It's like he realizes that he can't actually defeat Tiga. So he decides to play dirty, and I'm for that. So he holds people hostage. All right, I'm cool with it. But then she's like, all right, Tiga, and now I want you to fight me when you're their size. You know, I like this idea in concept, but the fact that it's being done by a supervillain who's just forcing this onto the situation, this was the point where I'm like, you had such an epic introduction. You were intimidating. You were scary. And now you're a schoolyard bully. What in the heck happened over the course of the last 2.5 issues or so? What the heck happened? So anyway, he tells him to do that. And because Tiga really does want to make sure that nobody dies, and perhaps because Tiga is just that confident, he abides by these dumb rules. And then we have the one last shot. It's one of those painted panels where he's small and he's running toward him. And then these are weird transitions. Why does it have to be done like this? I don't understand why, if you do transitions, why you don't save it for the next page or something like that. I don't know. It's just weird. Maybe I'm just not quite getting the composition, of this comic. We cut back to, where is it? As the battle reaches its peak on the ground, another danger looms elsewhere. So it doesn't really tell us where. And then we decide to introduce yet another villain. This is the moment where I start to feel like somebody told Mr. Wong and Mr. Lung that they were going to cut their comic short. So they just start rushing things. Because this is all going on, and now a completely unrelated villain is being introduced. And what makes it even weirder is deep in the bowels of there. So he's not even an alien. He's underground. Well, I think it's revealed later that he is an alien, but he's not in space right now. He is underground, deep underground. He's hanging out in lava, by the way, which is a little bit of foreshadowing. He says, "How long have I slept? I said something on the surface. Could it be? It is you, Tiga. It's time we met again. It's time I had my revenge." And if you're an eagle-eyed hardcore fan like me, you'll recognize this character. It's spelled differently in this comic, but it's Kyrieloid, who's from Ultraman Tiga episode 3. He was also a version of him, I guess you could say, was also in Ultraman Trigger. I'm pretty sure he was in more than one episode of Tiga. Yeah, because he came back later in episode 25. That's what I remember him best from. It was called The Devil's Judgment. And he does have a cameo in the final episode, episode 52, which is called To the Shining Ones. One of the best designed aliens, kaiju, villains, whatever, of the show. Arguably, it could be said, one of the more iconic monsters from the show. So I saw this. On a one hand, I was excited, but I'm also like, why is this happening now? What does he have to do with this? Well, let's move on to our penultimate issue, number 9, Past Sins, Present Dangers, which is where we get the title of this volume. And we have this pretty cool looking cover here where we have, I believe this is Kyrieloid, looming over Tiga, who's hunched over on the ground, apparently wounded, and there's fire all around Kyrieloid. And our cover art was done by Eric Vetter and The Realt, REALT, exclamation point, okay, of Udon Entertainment. I forgot about this. This is when we get to it. This might be the top weirdest moment of this entire comic. The peak of weirdness. All right, so let me see. How many pages is this? So we have the cover. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first 6 pages of this comic is half fourth wall break and half random backstory dump. I'm not kidding you. I was not prepared for this when I saw it. Again, my conjecture that Mr. Wong knew that this comic was going to end very soon. He just decided to go absolutely bonkers. So I'm assuming what we're seeing here, because the very first scene, okay, we just left off of Tiga's about to fight a monster that is at least 50 times his size. Well, not 50, but to quote the King Kong show theme song, 10 times as big as a man. Whatever. And then we introduce a new villain who's hiding out underground. He's like, ooh, I sense Tiga. I must go get my revenge, my terrible revenge things. If you know, you know. So you would think, oh, this is exciting. Can't wait for the next issue. Get the next issue. Fourth wall break. What? So it starts with, is mangaka the right way to put this? I don't know, but I'm assuming either this is Mr. Tony Wong or it's a pastiche of both him and Ku Fuklung. I swear, it's not a profanity. Don't look at me like that, parents. And he has a pen. He drops the pen, and the camera pans out in a panel, and we see his drawing desk. He's got a lamp. He's got a cup of steaming coffee. What looks like a restaurant drink cup over to the other side, and a bunch of Ultraman Tiga merchandise all around him. He's got a replica of his head. He's got what looks like a 25-inch tall action figure. He's got a little keychain plushy thing hanging right there. There's even an ashtray with a bunch of ashes and a couple of lighters laying next to it. And he says, everyone has a story to tell. Even the most evil, despicable monster has a tale to tell. Yes, even a creature as disgusting as Makila. And then Makila starts talking to him. Oh, you mean me, he says. The star of this issue? Oh, wait, I got to do it in the right voice. Oh, you mean me? The star of this issue? Finally! Everyone will know that I'm not a villain at all, but rather a poor victim of circumstance. I'm just like, what the frick is going on? And then we get this entire flashback where we find out that he was this super smart member of his species. He got driven up because people were jealous. And then our artist friend here, who, by the way, has an Ultraman crest and ears and eyes, which just looks really strange. I don't know what to think of that. He says, ha, so you say, but for accuracy's sake, I took the liberty of dispatching a research team to discover the uncensored truth. And it's basically like X-Men. He got branded a freak, was rejected by his kind, and then he just decides with sadistic glee to just kill all of his tormentors. He murders all of them. Discovers that he has this kind of jewel-looking thing. It looks like a rupee. Looks like it's shaped like a rupee from The Legend of Zelda, but it's yellow. It's in his stomach. It's dangerously close to his crotch. And, oh my gosh, it's borderline. If you're referring to lady parts, is that still called phallic? Let me know, Freudians. And then, he unlocks this ability, kills them all. And, it's like, where's that tribe's stupid champion now? And then it's the artist says, oh, and then you had a planet-wide arrest warrant put out for you. And then says like, yeah, basically says you're hardly a victim of circumstance. And then Makila bursts through the window to get at this guy in one panel. And then in the last panel of this entire weird 6-page sequence, we see a flattened Makila who looks like he's about the size of a dog and not a giant, laying next to our artist dude here. And by the way, he still has hair. He has an Ultraman crest, but he still has hair on either side, which looks even stranger. And he's holding a fly swatter. He says, yeah, right. And now we continue with our regularly scheduled story. If I was to give the normal Henshin Power V3 awards to this comic, this sequence by far gets the WTH What the Henshin Award. Deadpool was reading this and was confused. The frick was this? This was a fourth wall break as an excuse to, I'm guessing, to pad out this issue and get our villain's backstory in there. It's so random. It comes out of left field. I don't know what to do with this. It feels honestly a little bit pointless. I don't know if it was just because he's like, I came up with this character's backstory, I want it in there, or if it was done to be funny. I don't know. I can't make heads or tails of this. You know what? Screw it. Hit the button.
Rantmaster activated.
There you go. Your mandatory Rantmaster of the episode. Because, just what even is this? What even is this? Anyway, we get back to the actual story, and Tiga starts going at it with Makila, and he's still doing pretty well for himself, getting some sizable damage, zipping around all over him. Makila's getting angry because he can't get his mitts on. It's like, well, you made him small. If he's small, he's going to be a little harder to get at. But he does manage to try to eat Tiga, gets him in his mouth, and then Tiga says, yeah, screw that noise, does an energy attack, shatters his teeth, starts punching him in the gums to get him to open his mouth, goes for the eye, or he tries to go for the eye with a big energy attack, but then suddenly Makila develops the ability to shoot goo out of his claw arms, hits Tiga with it, throws him off balance, starts trying to get at him on the ground. And by the way, the entire time, he still has Tojo and Munakata in his hands. Somehow he hasn't accidentally crushed them. It's right up there. Listen to the Monster Island Film Vault episode on this movie. It's right up there with Space Monster Wang Mogwai, where despite everything that happens throughout the rest of the movie, he has a woman in his hand. And somehow, even though he's doing things like punching buildings and fighting the military and all that, she never gets hurt, ever. Yeah. So all this is going on. Tiga is still holding his own despite everything. Now he switches to Sky type and he starts zipping around a little bit more. Goes over to the claw with the two hostages to try to get them loose. But then our belly button jewel attack thing happens. And again, tell me, Freudians. And, so all this is going on. Then Makila decides, I'm changing the rules again. And he says, you have to not defend yourself and let me hit you 5 times. I'm like, this is just getting stupid at this point. But he does let him go back to his to giant size and just says you have to sit there. And Tiga goes along with this. I don't understand. Okay. The first time where he's like, oh, you have to be human sized and fight me, I could go with that because it gives Tiga an opportunity to be awesome. And there's a logic there. There's a confidence there. But then we get to the thing where it's like, you have to let me hit you 5 times. And it starts becoming apparent that Tiga is a heck of a lot less confident about this, but he's still going along with it. I'm trying to make sure. It's like, did he actually get them out? No, he still has the hostages because he has extra limbs now. He's got the little crab arms, but he also has actual big beefy arms. All right. So he's basically got 4 limbs. So Tiga's still going along with this, all of this stupidity, because he's still trying to get these hostages. And then we get to this kind of confusing sequence. I mean, there's a couple of those painted panels and it looks cool. But I'm just confused by this, where that belly button crystal beam gets shot at Tiga, and I don't know if he misses or if he's trying to dodge it, and it doesn't quite get him, or maybe it does. I can't quite tell. Does it actually hit him or not? Because I looked at first when I was reading this that he was leaning back to avoid getting hit, but no, apparently he got nailed in the chest. I think that is supposed to be the actual idea. So he doubles over, and then Makila just hits him again. And this just keeps going on. So now our hero is down because he has to play by this monster's stupid rules to try to free these hostages. And then Munakata just says, Tiga, just fight back. Just fight back. And then Makila's like, well, I guess I'm just going to crush you now. And then we get Munakata's backstory. Like, we're just throwing everything. Like, this is the book of flashbacks at this point. I'm just like, what is going on? We're getting all of these kind of randomly placed flashbacks, and we're getting Munakata's flashback. He used to be a cop, but he was a rough cop, and he was beating up punks. And then we cut back to the present, and then Tojo just smacks him for talking and starts begging Makila to spare him. So we have one villain who's gotten kind of stupid, and then we got one villain who's become kind of pathetic. So it's this weird hierarchy of just failing villains here, I would say. And then we have the Guts team, and they're crying over this whole thing, and they're like, oh my gosh, Munakata's gonna die. No one cares about Tojo, but Munakata's gonna die. And then Makila tries to do that, exactly that, but not by like squeezing them in the crab arm that he has him. No, he has to take one of his other appendages to try to do it, which gives Tiga time to come over there and have this cool moment where he grabs the two appendages that are trying to crush him and says, and restrains them. And then he, in a moment that you don't typically see outside of the Showa era of Ultraman, he dismembers Makila, breaks that crab arm off, and it's the one that is holding the hostages, doing what he should have done a long time ago, gets them loose, but then one of the other appendages, looks like a tail, comes at Tiga, hits him in the back, and then wraps around, and then we get another panel dedicated to the light-colored blood splatter, and without really showing it, it is readily apparent that Tojo just got his arm cut off. Again, we would not see this in the show. What were you thinking, Tsuburaya? Now I'm starting to wonder that this comic was going on for a while, and then it started getting zanier as it went, and less like Ultraman. Tsuburaya got wind of this, shut it down. So then our creative team just rushed everything else that they had planned in these last couple of issues. All right. And then Makila takes that severed arm, just to add to the nightmare fuel here, takes that severed arm and uses it to get a fingerprint, to launch the nuke. And then we cut to one of those painted panels again, and it looks really several of them actually. It looks really cool. And they're like, holy crap, the nuke got launched. What are we going to do now? And then Kyrieloid shows up. The other villain, who barely got introduced in the last issue, has now shown up at the end of the next issue as the nuke has been set off. I can understand how on one hand that might sound really exciting. We had one crazy plot twist where our punk villain is able to, to basically take that last step to accomplishing his sadistic goal, and then only to have that kind of ruined by the appearance of a new villain who has a completely different goal and has no connection whatsoever, for what I can remember anyway, to our current villain. He just shows up from underground in fire. He looks pretty awesome, and then that's just it. He just shows up and we're like, and it literally, the last panel of this issue is one of the Guts team members saying, who is that? And then we come to the final issue. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The last issue is arguably the worst issue of this comic. Issue 9 probably has the worst moment of the comic, because that fourth wall break is just bonkers and makes no sense. It just feels like a thinly veiled excuse for a self-insertion fourth wall break. Issue 9 just confused me. Issue 10 made me actively angry. If I was going to give myself another Rantmaster, which I might still do, it would be for this issue. And again, I don't know if this was the original plan and the comic got shut down before the creators could do anything. So it's a victim of the rushed production. Admittedly, the art looks good throughout. I'll say that much, but the narrative just falls apart. And I'll tell you right now, the comic ends as if there could be more. As far as I know, there ended up not being more. And I will tell you, if I was a reader in 2004 when this came out, and this final issue came out less than a week before my birthday. So if I was reading this, if I was an excited Ultraman Tiga fan at that moment, and I got this final issue, as weird as the last few had been, I got this last issue being like, oh my gosh, here's my birthday present to myself. And then I read this. I would have been livid. I mean, I'm livid now, just talking about it. All right, so you're going to finish this bizarre adventure with me, even if your name isn't JoJo. All right, let's get this over with. Tiga's Bizarre Adventure. So, our final cover of this run of comics, the issue is titled All Fall Down. Nice title. And it's just a group shot. It looks like a movie poster. We've got Tiga in the background, although you can really only see like his shoulder and his head. We've got Kyrieloid in front of him and a few members of the Guts team, including Reina and the captain. The thing is most of them don't do a whole lot in this. This is really Kyrieloid's comic. Spoiler warning in this last issue. And our cover artists are Elvin Lee and Ben Hewen of Udon Entertainment. At least the cover looks cool. Not the best cover of this run, but it still looks pretty cool. I would have liked something a little more epic and interesting for what is not basically, it is the final issue. All right. So after a brief recap about everything that's been going on for the last 2 pages, we have Kyrieloid saying, I feel sorry for these people. You don't stand a chance. And he goes after Tiga, just starts just embarrassing Tiga. Tiga's holding his own, but he's not really, despite his best efforts and his most anime of looking of moves, he keeps trying to get a hit on Kyrieloid, and it's not working. And then we get just this absolutely bizarre turn of events where we've got what looks like a flurry of fists coming from Tiga at Kyrieloid, and Kyrieloid says, have you also forgotten about how you destroyed my entire race 30 million years ago? And then we just have this one little panel. It's supposed to be a reaction shot of Tiga, but he's an Ultraman, so his expression doesn't change. So he's just like, huh? I think that's supposed to be the idea there. As he's trying to throw this flurry of fists at him. And then what we get, let me count. How long is this? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pages. The next 12 pages of this 40-page issue is this guy monologuing his entire backstory. It's a massive lore dump. And I'm sitting here reading this and I'm thinking, why is this here? This isn't a case of, like if you're reading a manga or something and the bad guy has this moment where he pauses during the fight and his life story flashes before him. I can work with that because this is being done for the sake of the audience, but for our character, it is a fleeting moment. This is this guy talking the entire time because bump my mic. That's how irate I am right now. Because this guy is monologuing all of this, presumably while he's trading blows with Tiga. I don't know. Let me jump ahead. Because there's a flurry of punches. Let me jump ahead to the end of this thing and just see what's going on. Yeah, after he finishes this diatribe, okay, I guess it's more like 11 and a half pages. And the next panel, after he finishes this freaking diatribe, he's just staring at Tiga. So maybe the fight stopped. I don't know. But why would you stand there? Why would you stand there and just let this guy talk? Why? It's like if you're watching a pro wrestling match and the bell rings and then our heroes throw a few hits at each other. They get, one guy gets suplexed or whatever, gets right back up. They try to lock up again. And then, some more moves get thrown. And then one guy just shoves the other one away, grabs a microphone while the match is still supposed to be going on. And then just starts talking on the mic, just starts trash talking. Or you're just like, let me tell you how I got here. And just starts telling him his life story from the past. I just... Sorry, I'm tapping the desk right now. You probably heard that. All right. Let's breeze through this ridiculous flashback. So basically, we found that the humans used to be in charge of the place. And then the Kiliel, who were also in the show. And by the way, Kiliel in Japanese means infernal people, and Kyrieloid means infernal warrior. So it already sounds kind of scary. There are some differences between the show version and this version. According to the Ultra Wiki, quote, unlike their original counterparts, the Kyralians were not aliens, but natives of the planet Earth who competed with mankind for supremacy. Also, Kyrieloid was not an impish existence trying to take over humanity, but more of an anti-hero as he cares for the fate of the Earth, as you'll soon find out here. So we have this massive flashback where we find out that the Kyriel went to war with the ancient civilization, and it was this constant back and forth. The war was pretty even until the Ultras showed up, and we have this big splash page of Tiga and the other two Ultras, and they look kind of bronzish, almost like bronze statues, and as you would expect, they're super jacked. And then they get involved with the war and turn the tide in favor of the ancient civilization. And then we have Kyrieloid talking about how he confronted Tiga way back then. And then there was peace for a couple of years, and then the monsters came, as we saw in the original flashback. And then in a moment that seems very intent on pulling a James Gunn in Superman with Krypton, we find out that the ancient civilization were not the nicest people, and while they were going to war with the monsters, they found the location of the Kiliel's civilization, and their response was destroy it. So they sent some ships there and basically nuked the place. And the Kiliel retreated to the Earth's core because they feed off of heat and fire in very Gamera fashion, even though apparently they're cold-blooded creatures. They're cold-blooded creatures, but they feed on fire. Well, I guess the same is true of Gamera and I guess dragons, because they're reptiles and all that. But whatever. And there are fire-breathing frogs now that I think about it, but, whatever on that. So all of this is going on, and then most of the Kiliel get wiped up in the ancient civilization while Kyrieloid hangs out down there, absorbing fire. That's Kyrieloid, almost like Killeroid or whatever. I prefer Kyrieloid in the other translation. Again, the LNR issue. And I forgot to mention that when the kaiju were attacking Kyrieloid, I'm going to switch between the names, was actually helping Tiga fight the monsters to protect the ancient civilization while the ancient civilization went and wiped out his people. So that's why he wants his terrible revenge things. So after all of that, we cut back to the quote-unquote present, and our hero and villain, their fists meet, and unfortunately, because there's all this fire around them, Kyrieloid gets the upper hand and magically launches Tiga after their fist clash. Says, after 30 million years, I will finally avenge my people. After 10,000 years, I'm free. So we get some energy attacks from Tiga. He tries using his Zaperian beam on him, and we've got some thought bubbles going on. And it's like, and Kyrieloid is like, if you're ready to fight, bring it on, blah. And we get all these explosions and anime effects and the reaction shots from the Guts team, and everyone's like, what the frick is going on? Oh no! And then the missiles all start colliding into each other. And it says Makila fired them without any programmed targets. They're flying on completely random courses, and they just start crashing all over the place. And then, they're like, that one over there, that's the nuclear missile. By the way, did you notice how Makila hasn't shown up? We're, more than halfway through this comic, and Makila's gone. We haven't seen him. He's still there, but we haven't seen him this entire time. He's been completely supplanted by Kyrieloid. So the nuke goes off course. Tiga sees it, and we have a thought bubble that says no. And then, here's a typo where Kyrieloid says, keep you mind on the fight, Tiga. Forgot the R there, Dark Horse. And then we see Tiga engulfed in flames, and Kyrieloid comes right at him and says, even if we are of similar strength, you'll never beat me if you don't stay focused. Die. And punches Tiga, and he goes flying. He hits a bunch of vehicles. Stuff gets wrecked. And, the Munakata's like, no, stop it. He's trying to protect humanity. And he's like, Tiga, don't give up. Blah, blah, blah. Go, Tiga. We love you. I'm a freaking adult bald Kenny. And then suddenly, Kyrieloid starts monologuing. He basically destroys the nuclear missile. Or is it detonating behind him? Maybe it's detonating behind him. That's what it's actually happening. It looks like it kind of crashed into him, but I think it's detonating behind him. And he says, I love the Earth more than you can possibly imagine, and I'm not about to watch you all destroy it. So he flies up as this explosion is going off, and we see some people get hit by the explosion, and they disintegrate, which is the sort of thing we rarely see happen in Ultraman. Weirdly enough, one of the times it happened was on Ultraman Cosmos, which was meant for children. Let that sink in. And then Kyrieloid says, if I didn't love this planet so much, I would let you all wipe yourselves out. And then he says, this heat, this energy, it's nothing to me. In fact, I can utilize their destructive powers to my advantage. Absorbing all this delicious radiation only increases my power. And he absorbs all of it. Then we turn the page and we have this massive splash page. It doesn't take up the entirety of both pages, but we just see all of this nuclear fire being absorbed by Kyrieloid. So he absorbs it all, and after he's done, he flies down to take a look at Tiga, who's still on the ground, and he says, now do you understand my power, Tiga? You're not this planet's savior. I am! Tiga gets up. And then we have another one of... I bumped my mic again. I'm sorry. Then we have another one of the weird moments of this comic. Ultraman Tiga speaks. And I know he speaks because it's not a thought bubble. It's a voice bubble. And he says, if you love this planet, we should put aside our differences and work together. Leave the past in the past. And I think what's happening, because I feel like there's a panel missing, it looks like Kyrieloid tries to punch him, but Tiga blocks it with his forearm, or their forearms meet, or something. I don't know. It's like, and Kyrieloid says, it's not that easy, Tiga. I've lived with this pain for too long. And then there's this kind of explosion from the impact or something. We got fire around. And now with only, 4 pages. With 4 pages left, Makila suddenly shows back up. He's like, hey, remember me? I'm still here. And he says, sheesh. Why don't you two just hug each other already? Come on, fight! Something I have said watching many an episode of Dragon Ball Z. Sorry, not sorry, Sentai guy. And then Kyrieloid says, I've had enough of you, Makila. And then just vaporizes him. Ta-da! The villain we have been following for most of the second half of this comic. And he gets vaporized by a guy who really didn't make his presence known until this last issue. What? And then Tiga's like, oh my gosh, he did that with one attack. And then Kyrieloid says, you've given me something to think about, Tiga. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? He said to leave the past in the past? What? What? I don't understand what is going on. I mean, like, he just, oh my gosh, this whole thing. And then he goes, no, it's Tiga. He says, when I feel the time, no, it's still Kyrieloid. It's just the positioning of the voice bubble is weird. He says, when I feel the time is right, you will see me again. Be ready. And then he just fades into the ground. I'm saving the Rantmaster for the end. All right. let's finish this sucker first. All right. So now, we have some narration from what I assume is Daigo, and he's like, oh, the image of Kyrieloid is haunting him. Munakata, it says Munakata came through for all of us. We misjudged him, blah, blah, blah. We're trying to wrap things up pretty quickly. And then, the commander gets guts reinstated. If I remember correctly, I think Tojo ends up dying. I can't remember. Did Tojo die? As he's not mentioned in, our wrap up here. And Daigo mentions, "Oh, we're a team again. We're a team again. The back and ready to face any force that might threaten the Earth, and we're not alone." And then we have these two skinny panels. One is a close up of Daigo's eyes, and then the next one is a close up of Tiga's eyes. And then our final panel of the comic here at the bottom of this page. The narration. It's a picture of Daigo charging. The background is outer space with planets and Tiga in a running stance. And it says, "Wherever danger lurks, Ultraman Tiga will be there." The end. All right, you know what? Hit it.
Rantmaster activated.
This is how you're going to end this comic. You're going to have our hero, the title hero, basically do nothing other than trade a few hits with a villain who just showed up at the 11th hour with a major axe to grind. And after monologuing for 11 and a half pages about his backstory, he mops the floor with Tiga and solves every single problem that our heroes have been trying to deal with for the better part of the second half of this series. He's the one who destroys the nuke and keeps it from doing more damage. He doesn't completely stop everything, but he keeps it from doing more damage. And he's the guy who kills Makila, who's been our primary villain for, like I said, most of the second half of this comic. And then just when you think, well, maybe at the very least, we'll get to see Tiga pick a fight with this guy and beat him, even if it is only with a few pages left. No. Kyrieloid just says, "You've given me something to think about," when I can't even, I'm not, it's like one thing, like Tiga speaks finally, and then it gets undermined by Makila interrupting things. And then he just says, like I said, "You've given me something to think about until we meet again." I don't know where that came from. And then just disappears. And we act like this is this big triumph for Tiga when he's done nothing but get embarrassed for most of this comic. For most of this final issue, at the very least. Like I said, this issue made me actively angry. To summarize it all, this comic started off strong. As I said, I'm a massive Tiga fan. I was excited by those early issues. As weird as it got, as gruesome and weird as it got at points, it still, for the most part, felt like Ultraman Tiga. But once, and just Ultraman in general, but once you get past the Regulan Seijin issues, so basically the last 4 issues, it comes completely unglued as it veers off into 90s McFarlane territory. And by the end, it's not Ultraman. It's something else entirely. And then you add on this awkward, weird anticlimax of an ending. Words can't describe my disappointment. It's honestly kind of tragic. So there you go. That is the Ultraman Tiga Dark Horse manga. Have any of you who are listening to this, have you read this comic? If you have, I would love to hear from you. Contact us by emailing us at henshin.power.v3@gmail.com or hit us up on the socials. Listen to the credits, because you should always listen to the credits. Or check the show notes, because you should always please read the show notes to get our contact information and let me know what you think of this. Or have you heard me go on for the better part of 2 weeks and almost 3 hours at this point, 2.5, 3 hours, ranting about this thing? Has it intrigued you enough that you're going to look into it? Like I said, I have a feeling I'll be writing an article about this for somebody at some point and trying to see if I can make a bit more sense of this truly, truly bizarre comic. All right. As usual, you know where to hopefully hit up Chris and Jake on their socials. Join our Facebook groups, Power Rangers Legacy and the Marklight Lounge on various places, including Facebook and Discord. Again, listen to the credits to find out where all of that is and check the show notes for links to everything. You can check out my author website, nathanjsmarchand.com, if you would like to not just hear me rant about stories, but also see me write some as well. And check out my flagship podcast, The Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast seeking entertainment and enlightenment through tokusatsu. It's primarily kaiju focused. It's got some well-researched episodes, a lot of film appreciation, history, culture, and also some audio drama segments. And speaking of audio dramas, I'm part of the Scyther podcast stable of actors. So you can go hear me on several of their productions, including Rito on Power Rangers, the audio drama, Deadpool on X-Men, the audio drama, Johnny Storm, baby, the Human Torch on Avengers, the audio drama, and coming soon, I will, as of this recording anyway, I will be on an upcoming episode of The Trial of Bruce Wayne, one of the most unique Batman stories I have ever come across, and that's saying a lot. So, with all of that out of the way, it's time that I wrapped up this 2-part bonus episode and got back to working on my other projects, including getting the rest of our mainline episodes out there for all of you to listen, and then start recording season 2, where we will be launching with Mirai Sentai Time Ranger with my friend Andrew Winja the Ninja. Just to give all of you a Kyrieloid style info dump in the middle of everything. And what have we learned this week? When your nemesis decides to monologue his entire backstory, just punch him in the face. And may the power protect you. Especially against monologuers like Kyrieloid. I'm not going to let that go. I'm sorry. I'm just not. Bye. Thank you for listening to Henshin Power V3, a podcast produced and hosted by Nathan Marchand,
Christopher Reiner,
and Jake Hamber.
If you'd like to send us feedback, we'd love to hear from you. So email us at henshin.power.v3@gmail.com.
Follow us on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. Thank you, Danny DeManna, where our handle is @HenshinPowerV3, and join our official Facebook groups, Power Rangers Legacy and the Marklight Lounge. We also have a Discord server called the Marklight Lounge. Check the show notes for links to all of them.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and other great podcatchers. The podcast logo was designed by Rebecca Hudgens. Follow her on Instagram at super_r_illustrations.
Our theme song is a Joe the Hero remix by GVG Kid, which is based on a track from the video game Beautiful Joe.
All film and audio clips belong to their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended or implied.
Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Podchaser to spread the word about the show. And until next time,
Schwatch!